On a scorching afternoon in May 1989, a man named Bob Lazar sat down for a television interview and said 9 words that changed everything. "I worked on reverse engineering extraterrestrial spacecraft." He claimed the work happened at a facility called S4, near a place the government refused to admit existed, Area 51. The story exploded. UFO researchers descended on the Nevada desert. Conspiracy theories metastasized. And for the first time, the American public became obsessed with a military installation that officially did not exist on any map. Area 51 sits in the Nevada Test and Training Range, roughly 83 miles northwest of Las Vegas. The facility sprawls across 9 million acres of scorched earth, larger than the state of Connecticut. The base itself is built around Groom Lake, a dry salt flat stretching 6 miles long. In the blistering summer, temperatures exceed 115 degrees Fahrenheit. The perimeter is ringed with motion sensors, surveillance cameras, and armed security contractors known as camo dudes, private guards who patrol in white pickup trucks. Signs warn that photography is prohibited and that deadly force is authorized. The airspace above is designated R4808N, restricted military airspace. Commercial and private pilots are forbidden to enter. In 2017, a civilian drone operator flew his quadcopter near the base boundary. But what is this place protecting? CIA pilot Tony LaVere and Lockheed engineer Kelly Johnson flew reconnaissance missions across Nevada, searching for the perfect site. Within months, construction crews arrived. They poured concrete runways, erected hangars, and built rudimentary barracks. No official budget existed. The project was funded through CIA black accounts, money that Congress never saw. The reason for all this secrecy was a machine unlike anything ever built, the U-2 spy plane. On August 4th, 1955, the first U-2 lifted off from Groom Lake. Test pilot Tony LaVere climbed to 65,000 feet, so high the sky turned indigo and the curvature of the Earth became visible. At sunset and sunrise, the U-2's silver wings, flying at altitudes where commercial jets didn't exist yet, caught the sun and glowed like fire against the darkening sky. In fact, a CIA report declassified in 1997 revealed that more than half of all UFO sightings in the late 1950s and 1960s were actually U-2 and SR-71 test flights. The government knew this. Blue Book investigators would interview witnesses, collect reports, and then dismiss nearly every case as weather balloons, swamp gas, or mass hysteria. What they never said was, "You saw a classified aircraft. The deception worked." But the U-2 was just the beginning. In the 1960s, Lockheed's Skunk Works developed an even more radical machine, the A-12 Oxcart, predecessor to the SR-71 Blackbird. Armed guards authorized to use deadly force on intruders, airspace designated R4808N. Pilots face prosecution if they enter nearest public viewpoint is 26 miles from the base itself. Testing the A-12 required even greater secrecy. The aircraft generated sonic booms that rattled windows 100 miles away. Pilots had to wear pressure suits because the cockpit altitude was equivalent to 60,000 feet. Between 1962 and 1968, the A-12 flew 2,850 test flights from Groom Lake. Not a single one was acknowledged. Workers at the base signed secrecy oaths that lasted for decades. And then, in the 1970s and 80s, something even stranger began at Area 51. The CIA and Air Force started testing captured Soviet aircraft, MiGs obtained through defectors and covert operations. But these were real, documented projects. What fueled the UFO conspiracy was the silence. For decades, the U.S. government refused to confirm that Area 51 even existed. Maps were redacted. Aerial photos were classified. That wall of secrecy made Area 51 irresistible. If the government was hiding something this aggressively, the logic went, it couldn't just be spy planes. It had to be something more. Lazar described propulsion systems that defied physics: antimatter reactors, gravity wave amplifiers, element 115. He said the craft were of extraterrestrial origin, recovered from crash sites, and that his job was to reverse engineer the technology. Skeptics pointed out problems. Lazar claimed to have degrees from MIT and Caltech. Neither institution has any record of him. His employment at Los Alamos National Laboratory couldn't be independently verified. And there were other voices. In 1989, a former Area 51 security officer claimed he'd seen a disc-shaped craft hover silently over the base. Craft technology he'd been asked to analyze. The photos showed humanoid figures with enlarged heads and elongated fingers. Bushman died weeks after the interview aired. Lockheed Martin never commented. But the most explosive testimony came from a man named Bob Lazar. On May 15, 1989, he appeared on Las Vegas television and said he'd worked at a site called S4, south of Groom Lake. Lazar claimed his job was to reverse engineer propulsion systems from 9 disc-shaped craft of extraterrestrial origin. He described a reactor the size of a basketball that bent space-time using an element he called Element 115. Element 115 didn't officially exist in 1989. It was synthesized in a lab 15 years later and named Moscovium. Lazar had described it in detail more than a decade before science created it. The government responded immediately. Lazar's employment records vanished. MIT and Caltech, where he claimed degrees, had no record of him. His birth certificate disappeared from county files. It was as if he'd been erased. But journalist George Knapp found Lazar's name in an old phone directory for Los Alamos National Laboratory, and a 1982 newspaper clipping mentioned him as a physicist there. In 2004, Dan Burish, a microbiologist, came forward claiming he'd worked on a classified project at Area 51 involving a living extraterrestrial. He called it J-Rod, a being from a possible future timeline sent back to study humanity. Burish described a humanoid with large eyes and gray skin, housed in a climate-controlled chamber. He claimed to have extracted tissue samples and communicated through gestures. Chosen in 1955 by CIA for complete isolation from Soviet satellites, original code name was Paradise Ranch. Ironic, for barren lakebed first U-2 test flight reached 65,000 feet altitude in August 1955. Then there were the contractors who got sick. In 1994, 5 men sued the Air Force claiming exposure to toxic chemicals at Area 51 had caused respiratory failure and cancer. 2 of them died before the trial. The government invoked national security privilege and dismissed the case. The men had signed agreements that prevented them from revealing what they'd handled. Their widows were left with death certificates listing unknown causes. What could be so sensitive that the government would let its own contractors die rather than admit what was buried there? By the 2000s, satellite imagery showed massive expansion at Groom Lake. New hangars appeared, each one large enough to house a football field. Freshly paved runways extended into the salt flats. Something big was under construction. In 2013, the CIA finally acknowledged Area 51's existence in declassified documents released under the Freedom of Information Act. But the admission was narrowly worded. The base existed, yes, and had tested the U-2 spy plane. Nothing more. The document was 355 pages long, and almost every page about post-1960 activities was redacted. Black lines covered entire paragraphs. Whole sections were missing. The acknowledgement raised more questions than it answered. Meanwhile, the test flights continued. Witnesses reported triangular craft moving at impossible speeds, making right-angle turns, hovering silently. In 2017, airline pilots over Nevada radioed air traffic control about an object moving faster than any known aircraft. The FAA transcript logged the sighting but offered no explanation. The object had crossed 500 miles of airspace in under 4 minutes. That's Mach 4, faster than any jet in the public record except the retired SR-71. Then, in 2019, a group of internet users organized a joke event, Storm Area 51. The Facebook post went viral, with 2 million people pledging to rush the gates. On September 20th, about 150 people actually showed up. They gathered at the gates, took photos, and left. What kind of secret demands that level of security? Former CIA pilot Kenneth S. Those underground facilities, he claimed, went down at least 7 levels. Access required biometric scans and codes that changed daily. He'd seen blast doors thick enough to survive a nuclear strike. In 2020, a budget document leaked from the Department of Defense showed a line item for Groom Lake operations, $180 million. For a base that officially only tests conventional aircraft, that's an extraordinary sum. Compare that to the budget for Edwards Air Force Base, the publicly acknowledged test site in California, which received 60 million the same year. And then there are the lights. Almost every night, people living in the towns around Area 51 see lights moving in patterns that defy physics. Sudden stops, instantaneous acceleration, formations that split and recombine, no sound. Area 51's restricted airspace is larger than the state of Connecticut security contractors use deadly force authorization beyond the perimeter. The base runway stretches 12,000 feet across the dry lake bed. In 1987, 2 years before Lazar went public, a security contractor named Robert Frost died in a mysterious accident at the base. Official report: chemical explosion during routine work. She fought for answers for 3 years. When the full report finally arrived, it contained 12 pages describing the layout of a facility that, according to the Air Force, did not exist. This pattern repeats. Information leaks. Witnesses come forward. Then evidence disappears. In 1994, President Clinton signed an executive order exempting Area 51 from all environmental disclosure laws. The reason given: national security. The effect: complete legal immunity. By 1996, workers were filing lawsuits claiming exposure to toxic chemicals burned in open pits. They described barrels of unknown substances, clouds of black smoke, respiratory failure. 2 workers died. But what if the secrecy isn't about protecting experimental aircraft? What if it's about protecting something the government cannot explain? In May 2019, satellite images revealed a massive expansion. New hangars the size of football fields appearing seemingly overnight. One structure measured 510 feet long. That's larger than any hangar ever built for a known aircraft. Large enough to house something with a wingspan exceeding a 747. Aviation analyst Tyler Rogoway studied the images for weeks. He noted something stranger. The hangars have no obvious entrances on the side facing public view. Access tunnels run underground. Then there's the airspace. Area 51 sits at the center of the largest restricted airspace in America. 12,000 square miles where civilian and even most military aircraft are forbidden. In 2017, a civilian pilot clipped the edge of the restricted zone by 200 feet. Within 90 seconds, 2 F-16s flanked his Cessna. He was escorted to a remote airstrip, detained for 9 hours, and fined $18,000. The workers who fly into Area 51 every day, the ones on Janet Airlines, are perhaps the most enigmatic piece. They sign non-disclosure agreements so strict that violating them can result in federal imprisonment. In 2003, journalist Glenn Campbell tracked one worker who agreed to speak anonymously. The worker described a facility with entire levels underground, labs that required retinal scans for entry, and materials that emitted light with no heat. That same year, a Freedom of Information Act request revealed the base consumed 2 million gallons of fuel per month. That's enough to power a city of 30,000 people. What kind of operation burns that much fuel? The SR-71 Blackbird, the fastest jet ever built, consumed 8,000 gallons per hour. Even if Area 51 flew Blackbirds around the clock, the math falls short. In 2011, the CIA finally acknowledged Area 51's existence in declassified documents, but only as a testing site for the U-2 spy plane in the 1950s. No mention of what happens there now. Yet on the same day the documents were released, aviation photographer Trevor Paglen captured an image of a triangular aircraft leaving the base. It had no visible engines, no contrails. Over 400 former employees have signed non-disclosure agreements. Bob Lazar passed a polygraph test administered by former FBI polygrapher. In 1994, 5 contractors sued for exposure to unknown toxins at the base. Paglen's photo reignited the debate. Aviation experts couldn't identify the craft. Its shape didn't match any known stealth design. The Pentagon refused comment. This brings us back to Bob Lazar. For 30 years, his story hasn't changed. He describes a propulsion system that bends space-time using a stable isotope of element 115. Critics say Lazar must have guessed that his story is elaborate fiction. But he also described a hand-scanning security system that read bone density in 1989, a technology that didn't appear in commercial use until 2006. Then there's his education. Lazar claims he earned degrees from MIT and Caltech. Both schools deny any record of him. But a 1982 phone directory from Los Alamos National Laboratory lists him as a physicist. Investigative journalist George Knapp spent years trying to verify Lazar's background. He found a marriage certificate listing Lazar's employer as Naval Intelligence. He found colleagues who remembered working with him. In 2019, filmmaker Jeremy Corbell released a documentary revisiting Lazar's claims. Within 48 hours, the FBI raided a business Lazar co-owned, seizing computers and files. The official reason, an investigation into a client. But nothing was ever charged. So what is Area 51 really hiding? If it's just experimental aircraft, why the extreme measures? Why erase records? Why raid a witness 30 years after he spoke? Because at the end of every trail of evidence, there's a wall. A legal wall, a classified wall, a wall of missing documents and vanished witnesses. The most telling thing about Area 51 isn't what happens inside. It's what happens when you try to get close. Janet Airlines, the world's most secretive commercial carrier, runs daily flights from Las Vegas to Groom Lake. No passenger manifests. The workers who board those flights sign agreements that carry criminal penalties for disclosure. They work on projects with code names like Senior Trend and Tacit Blue. They come home every night and say nothing. In 2013, the CIA released documents that finally acknowledged what everyone already knew. Area 51 exists, but the admission came with an asterisk. The document dump was strategic. Give the public what they'd already pieced together from satellite photos and FOIA requests. Maintain the veil over everything that matters. The tactic worked. Media outlets ran headlines about UFO myths being debunked. Because here's what the CIA files didn't mention: the underground facilities. Multiple sources, including contractors who've worked at the site, describe a vast subterranean complex beneath the base, levels extending dozens of stories down, elevators that descend for minutes. Phil Schneider claimed he helped build those levels in the 1970s. He described encountering caverns that predated the construction, spaces that had been excavated long before any human crew arrived. He gave lectures about it. Then there's the radiation. In 1955, the Atomic Energy Commission detonated 928 nuclear devices at the Nevada test site, just 40 miles from Area 51. Fallout blanketed the region. Workers at Groom Lake were never evacuated. The government invoked the state secrets privilege, a legal doctrine that allows cases to be dismissed if hearing them would reveal classified information. The workers lost. Their medical records were sealed. Compensation denied. Armed guards authorized to use deadly force beyond the warning signs. Motion sensors blanket every approach road within 3 miles. Camouflaged surveillance posts watch from surrounding mountain peaks. It's a pattern. Every attempt to pierce the secrecy ends at the same wall. Journalists file FOIA requests, denied on national security grounds. Pilots report unidentified craft, flight logs classified. Residents near the base develop rare cancers, data withheld. But the machine has cracks. In 2017, the New York Times revealed the Pentagon had been running a secret UFO investigation program called AATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. Budget, $22 million. Duration, 2007 to 2012. The program's director, Luis Elizondo, resigned in protest over what he called excessive secrecy. He went public with videos, officially released by the Pentagon, showing Navy pilots tracking objects that defied known physics, objects that accelerated instantly. Commander David Fravor, the pilot who encountered one of these objects off San Diego in 2004, described it as a white tic-tac, 40 feet long, with no visible propulsion. It mirrored his maneuvers, then vanished. The Pentagon confirmed the videos are authentic, but it refused to explain what the objects are, or where they come from, or why encounters have been increasing. Of those 144 cases, the report could identify only one with certainty: a large, deflating balloon. The other 143 remain unexplained. 18 involved objects exhibiting unusual flight characteristics: no thermal exhaust, hypersonic speeds, transmedium travel. But everyone knows where. The same place experimental aircraft have been tested for 70 years. The same place witnesses report seeing triangular craft hover silently at night. The same place the Air Force spends billions without congressional oversight. In 2019, a viral Facebook event called for 2 million people to storm Area 51. It was a joke, until 3,000 actually showed up in the desert. The truth is, We may never know what happens behind the fence, not because the technology is too advanced, but because the system is designed to ensure we don't. But the questions don't go away. Why do military pilots keep encountering objects that outperform anything in our arsenal? Why has the Pentagon suddenly reversed decades of denial and admitted these encounters are real? In the end, Area 51 is a mirror. What you see depends on what you're willing to believe. A testing ground for next-generation aircraft? Almost certainly. A storage site for recovered alien technology? Bob Lazar's story may be true. It may be a fabrication. But the fact that we can't prove it either way, that's the point. The system is designed to make verification impossible. Documents disappear. Witnesses recant. Records are sealed. What's certain is this. Somewhere in the Nevada desert, behind fences and warning signs and armed guards, the most advanced aerospace technology on Earth is being developed. The lights still appear over Groom Lake. The Janet flights still take off every morning. And the people who work there still come home in silence. So the desert keeps its secrets. The fence stays up. The files stay classified.